Hello and welcome back to more Southern horrors and other writings. My name is Alan, and before we get in today's video, I do want to go ahead and remind you I've got two ways to donate to the channel if you are so inclined. I have a Patreon account, which is a monthly or month-to-month donation system, and I have a coffee account which can do much the same but also single one-time donations. I have both listed in the description box below the video as usual. Do not donate if you are in financial difficulties, or donating would put you there. You know, it's tough enough on everybody as is, especially with morons in fucking charge, as is the case now. If you can afford it and you want to donate, thank you. I really do appreciate it. It's me, myself, and I that do this. I do the filming, editing, posting, everything. So yeah, and I take no commercial money as a personal decision. And I'm not getting paid yet by any of the social media sources that I post upon. With that said, let's go ahead and jump into the video. We are continuing the red record today from A Victim in the Market. Soon after the murder of the man on the street car, many of the same mob marched down to the marketplace, where they found a colored market man named Lewis Taylor, who had gone to begin his early morning's work. He was at once set upon by the mob and killed. The Picayune account says, between 1 and 2 o'clock this morning, the mob of several hundred men and boys, made up of participants in the earlier affairs, marched on the French market. Lewis Taylor, a Negro vegetable carrier who was about 30 years of age, was sitting at the soda water stand. As soon as the mob saw him, fire was opened and the Negro took to his heels. He ran directly into another section of the mob, and any number of shots were fired at him. He fell face down on the floor of the market. The police in the neighborhood rallied hurriedly and found the victim of mob violence seemingly lifeless. Before they arrived, the Negro had been beaten severely about the head and body. The ambulance was summoned, and Taylor was carried to the Charity Hospital, where he was found to have been shot through the abdomen and arm. The examination was a hurried one, but it sufficed to show that Taylor was mortally wounded. After shooting Taylor, the members of the mob were pluming themselves on their exploit. The nigger was at the soda water stand, and we commenced shooting him and one of the riders. He put his hands up and ran, and we shot until he fell. I understand that he is still alive. If he is a wonder. He was certainly shot enough to be killed. The members of the mob readily admitted that they had taken part in the assaults which marked the earlier part of the evening. We were up on Jackson Avenue and killed a nigger on Blair Street. We came down here, saw a nigger, and killed him too. This was the way they told the story. Boys, we are out of ammunition, said someone. Well, we will keep on like we are, and if we can't get some before morning, we'll take it. We have got to keep this thing up. Now we have started. This declaration was greeted by a chorus of applauding yells, and the crowd started up the levee. Half of the men in the crowd, and they were all of them young, were drunk. Taylor, when seen by the charity hospital, was suffering greatly and presented a pitiable spectacle. His clothing was covered with blood, and his face was beaten almost into a pulp. He said that he had gone to the market to work and was quietly sitting down when the mob came and began to fire on him. He was not aware at first that the crowd was after him. When he saw its purpose, he tried to run but fell. He didn't know any of the men in the crowd. There is hardly a chance Taylor will recover. The police told the crowd to move on, but no attempt was made to arrest anyone. A gray-haired victim. The bloodthirsty barbarians, having tasted blood, continued to hunt and soon ran across an old man of 75 years. His life had been spent in hard work about the French market, and he was well known as an unoffending, peaceable, and industrious old man. But that made no difference to the mob. He was a Negro, and he was with a fiendishness that was worse than that of cannibals. They beat his life out. The report says there was another gang of men parading around the streets in the lower part of the city looking for any stray Negro who might be on the streets. As they neared the corner of Dauphine and Carleric, the square below Esplanade Avenue, they came upon Baptiste Tilo, an aged Negro who works in the French market. Tilo for years had been employed by the butchers and the fish merchants to carry baskets from the stalls to the wagons and unload the wagons as they arrive in the morning. He was on his way to the market when the mob came upon him. One of the gang struck the old Negro, and as he fell, another in the crowd, supposed to be a young fellow, fired a shot. The bullet entered the body just below the right nipple. As the Negro fell, the crowd looked into his face, and they discovered that the victim was very old. The young man who did the shooting said, "Oh, he is an old Negro. I'm sorry that I shot him." This is all the old Negro received in the way of consolation. He was left where he fell, but later staggered to his feet and made his way to the 3rd Precinct station. There the police summoned the ambulance, and the students pronounced the wound very dangerous. He would be carried to the hospital as rapidly as possible. There was no arrest. Just before daybreak, the mob found another victim. He, too, was on his way to the market driving a meat wagon. But little is told of his treatment. There was nothing more than the following brief statement. At nearly 3 o'clock this morning, a report was sent to the 3rd Precinct station that a Negro was lying on the sidewalk at the corner of Decatur and St. Philippe, and the man had been pulled out of a meat wagon and riddled with bullets. When the police arrived, he was insensible and apparently dying. The ambulance students attended the Negro and pronounced his wounds fatal. there was nothing found which would lead to the discovery of his identity. Fun in Gretna. If there were any persons so deluded to think that the human life in the South is valued any more than the life of a brute, he will be speedily undeceived by reading the accounts of unspeakable barbarism committed by the mob in and around New Orleans. In no other civilized country in the world, nay, more, in no land of barbarians, would it be possible to duplicate the scenes of brutality that were reported from New Orleans. In the heat of blind fury, one might conceive how a mad mob might beat and kill a man taken red-handed in a brutal murder. But it is almost past belief to stand that civilized white people, men who boast of their chivalry and blue blood, actually had fun in beating, chasing, and shooting men who had no possible connection with any crime. But this actually happened in Gretna, a few miles from New Orleans. In its description of the scenes of Tuesday night, the Picayune mentions the brutal chase of several colored men whom the mob sought to kill. In the instances mentioned, the paper said, Gretna had its full share of excitement between 8 and 11 o'clock last night in connection with a report that spread through the town that a Negro resembling the slayer of Police Captain Day of New Orleans had been seen on the outskirts of the place. It is true that a suspicious-looking Negro was observed by the residents of Madison and Amelia Streets lurking about the fences of that neighborhood just after dark, and shortly before 8 o'clock, John Fisk, a young white man, saw a Negro on 4th Street. He followed the darky a short distance, and coming upon Robert Moore, who is known about town as the Black Detective, Fisk pointed the Negro out, and Moore at once made a move to the stranger. The latter observed Moore making in his direction, and without a word he sped in the direction of the Brooklyn pasture, Moore following and firing several shots at him. In a few minutes, a half-hundred white men, including Chief of Police Miller, Constable Dannenhauer, Patrolman Keegan, and several special officers, all well armed, joined in the chase, but in the darkness the Negro escaped. Just as the pursuing party reached the town again, two of the residents of Lafayette Avenue, Peter Lesson and Robert Henning, reporting that they had just chased and shot at a Negro who had been seen in the yard of the former's house, they were positive the Negro had not escaped from the square. Their report was enough to set the appetite of the crowd on edge, and the square was quickly surrounded, while several dozens of men, armed with lanterns and revolvers, made a search of every yard and under every house in the square. No Negro was found. The crowd of armed men was constantly swelling, and at 10 o'clock it had reached the proportions of a small army. At 10:30 o'clock, an outbound freight train is due to pass through Gretna on the Texas and Pacific Road, and the crowd, believing the Captain Day slayer might be aboard one of the cars attempting to leave the scene of his crime, resolved to inspect the train. As the train stopped at the Madison Street crossing, the engineer was requested to pull very slowly through the town in order that the trucks of the cars might be examined. There was a string of armed men on each side of the railroad track. In a few moments, a Negro was espied riding between two cars. A half dozen weapons were pointed at him, and he was ordered to come out. He sprang out with alacrity and was pounced upon almost before he reached the ground. Robert Moore grabbed him and pushed an ugly-looking derringer under his nose, and the Negro threw up both hands. Constable Dannenhauer and Patrolman Keegan took charge of him and hustled him off to jail, where he was locked up. The Negro does not at all resemble Robert Charles, but it was best for his sake that he was placed under lock and key. The crowd was not in a humor to let any Negro pass muster last night. The prisoner gave his name as Luke Wallace. But now came the real excitement. The train had slowed down almost to a standstill in the very heart of town. Somebody shouted, "There he goes, on top of the train!" And sure enough, somebody was going. It was a Negro, too, and he was making a beeline for the front end of the train. A veritable shower of bullets, shot, and rifle balls greeted the flying form, but on it sped. The locomotive had stopped in the middle of the square between Lavoisier and Newton streets, and the Negro, flying with the speed of the wind along the top of the cars, reached the first car of the train and jumped to the tender and then into the cab. Several white men standing at the locomotive made a rush into the cab. The Negro sprang out swiftly out the other side onto the sidewalk, but there were several more men, and as he realized that he was rushing right into their arms, he made a spring to leap over the fence of Miss Linden's home on the wood side of his track. Before the Negro got to the top, one white man had hold of his legs while another rushed up, pistol in hand. The man who had a hold of the darkey's legs was jostled out of the way, and the man with the pistol standing directly beneath the Negro sent 2 bullets at him. There was a wild scramble, and the vision of the fleeing form in the Linden yard, but that was the last seen of the black man. The yard was entered and searched, and the neighboring yards were also searched, but not even a trace of blood was found. It was almost impossible to believe that the Negro was not wounded, for the man who fired at him held a pistol almost against the Negro's body. The shots brought out almost everybody white in town, and though there was nothing to show for the exciting work except the arrest of the Negro, who doesn't answer the description of the man wanted, Gretna's male population had its little fun and simply repaid for all the trouble it was put to and all the ammunition wasted. Brutality in New Orleans. The mob rule reigned supreme Wednesday, and the scenes that were enacted challenged belief. How many colored men and women were abused and injured is not known, for those who escaped were glad to take a place of refuge and took no time to publish their troubles. The mob made no attempt to find Charles. It was only purpose was to pursue, beat, and kill any colored man or woman who happened to come in sight. Speaking editorially, the Picayune of Thursday, the 26th of July, said, "Escaped with their lives." At the Charity Hospital Wednesday night, more than a score of people were treated for wounds received at the hands of the mob. Some were able to tell of their mistreatment, and the recitals were briefly given as in the Picayune as follows. Alex Ruffin, who is quite seriously injured, is a Pullman car porter, a native of Chicago. He reached New Orleans at 9:20 o'clock last night, and after finishing his work, boarded a Henry Clay Avenue car to go to De La Chaise Street, where he has a sick son. I hadn't ridden anyway, said he, when I saw a lot of white folks. They were shouting, "Get the niggers." I didn't know they were after every colored man they saw, and sat still. 2 or 3 men jumped on the car and started at me. One of them hit me over the head with a slung shot, and they started to shooting at me. I jumped out of the car and ran although I had done nothing. They shot me in the arm and in the leg. I would certainly have been killed had not some gentleman taken my part. If I had known New Orleans was so excited, I would never have left my car. George Morris is the name of a Negro who was badly injured by a mob which cut through the Poydras market. Morris was employed as watchman there. He heard the noise of the passing crowd and looked out to see what the matter was. As soon as the mob saw him, its members started after him. One man hit me over the head with a club, said George, after his wounds had been dressed, and somebody cut me in the back. I didn't hardly think what was the matter at first, but when I saw they were after me, I ran for my life. I ran to the coffee stand where I worked for protection, but they were right after me, and somebody shot me in the back. At last the police got me away from the crowd. Just before I was hit a friend of mine who was in the crowd said, "You had better go home, nigger. They're after your kind." I didn't know then what he meant. I found out pretty quick. Morris is at the hospital. He is a perfect wreck, and while he will probably get well, he will have a close call. And Esther Fields is a Negro washerwoman who lives in South Claiborne and Toledano streets. She was at home when she heard a big noise and went out to investigate. She ran into the arms of the mob and was beaten into insensibility in less time than it takes to tell it. Esther was being treated at the charity hospital and should be able to get about in a few days. The majority of her bruises are about the head. T.P. Sanders fell at the hands of the Jackson Avenue mob. He lives at 1927 Jackson Avenue and was sitting in front of his home when he saw the crowd marching out the street. He stayed to see what the excitement was all about and was shot in the knee and thorax and horribly beaten about the head before the mob came to the conclusion that he had been done for and passed on. The ambulance was called and he was picked up and carried to the charity hospital where his wounds were dressed and pronounced serious. Oswald McMahon is nothing more than a boy. He was shot in the leg and afterward carried to the hospital. His injuries are very slight. Dan White is another charity hospital patient. He is a Negro roustabout and was sitting in a bar room at Poydras and Franklin Streets when the mob passed along and espied him. He was shot in the hand and would have been roughly dealt with had some policemen not been luckily near and rescued him. In addition to the Negroes who suffered from the violence of the mob, there were several patients treated at the hospital during the night who had been with the rioters and had been struck by stray bullets or injured in scuffles. None of this class were hurt to any extent. They got their wounds dressed and got out again. And went out again. So they went right back to hunting for people to lynch, to hurt. It shows you how much bullshit a lot of the forms of lynching took. Oh, goodness. Trying to get a sleeve over my arm where I had the port put in recently, so. But, yeah. With this said, let me go ahead and apologize for the usage of certain words. I say this every time I do it to try to show the realness of what happened, how things happened. I don't enjoy it. I think it's disgusting. I don't like the words. There were 4 uses of the N word and 2 uses of the, a lot of the times agreed upon, slur that begins with a D. So, yeah. It just shows how vile, how disgusting, how wretched racism has played a part in American history. And again, it's like some people don't even realize this. I wasn't even aware of the Tulsa race riots until a few years ago when the news started coming out when the last survivors were passing on. And it was brought up again. History always comes back out to bite you in the ass. And they will come back and show the evil committed, like we're seeing today, by the racist shits. They may be dead and gone at that point, but the wretchedness and evil of their fucking behavior will be fucking shown. And they will forever be seen as the wretched shits they should be seen as. But yeah, this will leave us, I think, a total of 10 pages, so maybe about an episode or 2. No, we got even more than that. Let's see, page 208. 16 pages, more or less. So we got 2-3 episodes to go for the book to be finished out. But yeah. It's just despicable, disgusting. And it shows how stupid racist people are. African American people weren't doing any evil, and they were being lynched, mobbed by these stupid fucking writers. Those are writers, not the protesters that Fox News and this shitbag fucking news networks want to try to make nowadays out as writers. Those aren't writers. Those are protesters. Those in the book are fucking writers. Those on January the 6th were fucking writers. Don't give me... I don't ever fucking want to hear anything from a right-wing shitbag fucktard son of a bitch ever again about some people being writers when all they're doing is protesting. You can take a fucking 2x4 and stick it up your ass. I'm tired of your bullshit. Hell, fuck a 2x4. Take a fucking 4x4 and stick it up your goddamn ass. So all you're good is to be a post into the goddamn fucking ground. I'm serious. I'm just so annoyed with the hatred, vile, decrepit evil that is these racist jackasses. And more or less nowadays, it's the right wing that is those people. But anyway. Enough of that. We'll go ahead and end this episode here. As always, educate thyself. Think, read, study, learn. Someone tells you something you have trouble believing, ask them to cite their sources. Not just a bunch of tinfoil hat wearing sources. Or a bunch of anecdotes slapped together to try to make a source. We want, as good as you can get, sources to prove your point. I know sometimes the modern news is so filled up with wanting to suck off people in power that a lot of stories are hidden, but try to get your sources out there one way or the other. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you all in the next one. Until then, later.